Little music intro to get us all excited about
Got a
talking.
topic tonight? Yeah.
So, hi, folks. This is Centered Live with real conversations about what grounds us, lifts us, and helps us live with purpose, clarity, and compassion. Your hosts are Randy Burgoyne and Paul Malloy. We're husbands, fathers, teachers, longtime friends, and men of tremendous experience and faith, I do say. So we're happy to have you here and join our episode. Today we're talking about determining the truth. And I guess in this time frame, in this era of social and economic and political chaos, one of our greatest challenges is knowing what to believe. What is real? What is true? Like, for example, a few years ago, there was a viral video post of a lady that claimed that this special juice
Hmm.
cured her cancer.
Oh my. Okay.
And she says, "Oh, all I did is drink it for 3 months." Well, it went viral, and she sold, thousands of this
Wow.
fake juice, right?
Well, it's
And
probably real juice, just didn't cure the cancer, right?
right, it was a fake cure. There was nothing that it did to cure cancer. There was no evidence. There's no studies. It was just what we'd call anecdotal evidence.
Hmm.
It's just one person's testimony of a success.
I understand that. And, I think a lot of people are sometimes desperate for anything that can help or work. And so
Yeah.
they'll try it. I mean, I have tinnitus in both ears really, really badly. And I've tried some vitamin supplements because somebody else said it worked for them. It didn't work. Not for me.
Well, you remember back in COVID, I had COVID. Yeah,
Hmm.
early on, I had it in the end of 2020, and there was no vaccine yet or anything, and people were passing around these cures to get your taste buds back, right?
Right.
Do you remember the burnt orange one? You would take an orange, put a little
Yes.
brown sugar on it, put it in your broiler, and roast it until it was almost black, and then
Oh, my.
you'd
I
consume.
remember this. I do. I never tried it.
Well, I was so desperate to get my smell and taste back, I tried it.
Okay. And
It didn't work. And there are some things that people are desperate to try, especially when it's related to health
Mhm,
or
mhm.
their circumstances in their life.
There's another scenario too, and that is that sometimes something has been said to be true for so long that everybody kind of accepts it as being true without question. And then somebody comes along and says, no, wait a second, is that actually what we have in this situation? And with a little bit of investigation, perhaps it is determined that, oh, wait a second, what we thought was true was in point not true. And one really short example of that is that for 200 years, everybody thought that dinosaurs dragged their tails. But then somebody in the 1960s or 70s, a paleontologist, says, why is it that we don't ever see fossilized marks of tail dragging, And then they said, well, but modern lizards don't run with tails dragging, they run with them up. And so all of a sudden it started to click and make sense, okay, that probably wasn't the truth of dinosaur living, right? One that's a little bit closer to home, both figuratively and metaphorically. Uh, it's interesting that for thousands of years, human beings thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, and in fact, that the sun rotated around the Earth. And in about 1630, a scientist and clergyman named Galileo said, "Wait a second! What I'm observing through a telescope doesn't seem to indicate that the Earth is stationary and everything is revolving around us. If anything, it looks like we orbit the sun. And when he published his findings based on scientific observation, the Catholic Church immediately began an inquisition. And the result of that inquisition was that Galileo was put under house arrest for the rest of his life. And from 1633, for about another 10 years, he was under house arrest. And his entire reputation was, in a lot of ways, destroyed and made fun of until other scientists began to say he was right. And then, with a lot more observation, a lot more evidence, suddenly people began to say, oh, well, okay, then that begins to make sense. It wasn't that the Earth was ever the center of the universe and then something changed. It was our understanding of the reality of the truth that changed.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you think about the technology that's advanced in just the last 150 years, as far
Right.
as discoveries and looking beyond the stars or beyond our own universe, there's
Yeah. Yeah.
tremendous knowledge that we've gained that we didn't know was there before. But that doesn't make it not true.
Right. Right. And so let me back up for just a minute because this is really important. We as human beings, we're always trying to find what is true, what is real, what can we believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a really good question that frequently gets debated is truth relative or circumstantial, or does it change over time? In other words, does truth actually change over time? Or is truth actually constant and it's our understanding or interpretation that changes? And I think through the examples that we've just shared, we can begin to understand how it is that we can believe for a long time in something that we think is true, and then later we understand, oh, with greater knowledge, greater evidence, we can recognize what we thought before was not actually fact, it wasn't true. To that, though, is this other common saying. We often hear that our perception is reality. In fact, experts go so far as saying, and by this I mean psychologists and sociologists tell us that the stories we tell ourselves are so powerful that we have to be careful. So perception, then, even when it's not true, apparently becomes our reality. But does that make our perceptions true? What do you think?
Well, I think that we have to take an opportunity to learn how to determine what is true. I could say there are 8 planets. I could say there are 9 planets.
Right?
And I might be right. 100 years ago, I would be right. And then 50 years ago, I'd be wrong. There's 9, but now today there's back to 8. So,
right.
so, so here's some steps. I'm going to display a little card here, and
Fantastic.
I'm going to post this in our notes and on our Facebook page and things, so that you can have this as a reference. But there's 7 ways of finding misleading types of evidence, discovering that it is misleading. First is anecdotal evidence. My uncle smoked his whole life and lived to 95, so smoking isn't that bad. Okay, that's when you're using a story or even a personal example of some magic juice that cured my cancer, or
Right.
Somebody that was an outlier of the normal statistics, like he lived to 95 and a smoker, so it can't be bad for you. Number 2 is cherry picking, and that is where you just, oh, I like that piece of evidence, so I'm going to pick that one right out of the middle of it. So I was saying, oh, you know what? My city is perfect. Our crime is down and everything. But you know what? the cities north and south of us, their crime has gone up. So which is it? Which is the truth? Is crime up or down? Uh, false cause. So this one is very common in today in social media. All the posts I see say this diet works, so it must be true.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of this, whether it's health or finance or AI, all the AI stuff that's going on now. And four, appeal to authority. So you might have a celebrity that says it's wonderful, it's reality, and they're not even an expert in that field, right? But just because they're popular, they get the attention.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Then there's bandwagon fallacy, where everybody's doing it. How could it be
Mm-hmm.
wrong? And this one, this one I think is just common sense. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't make it right. But that's a hard one. If somebody's grown up without learning those type of um, skills to determine what is true,
Mm-hmm.
you might
Mm-hmm.
just jump on the bandwagon with everybody else. And then misleading statistics. This is kind of um, falling into the cherry picking thing, misleading statistics. You're going to pick the statistic that meets your interests. So if there was 100% increase in shark attacks, and that was from one shark attack to two shark attacks.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually an article in a newspaper. And so these are real examples of things that people have said and reports that have happened. So using these as guidelines, we can help us to determine the truth if it is
Mm-hmm.
to be found.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in point of fact, I was thinking that these are really good tools, and I was wondering if they also work when we think about bias in media. And I'm sure that they can, but maybe we can also talk more specifically about that, how all media, or let's put it this way, most media has a bias. Now, what's really interesting, I think, Randy, is that we understand the word bias itself. And I was just looking up the definition of the word bias according to the Oxford Languages Dictionary. And number one, prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair.
Mm.
Okay. Number two, a systematic distortion of a statistical result due to a factor not allowed for its or in its derivation. Um, what I think that we forget though is that, again, the reality is that we all have bias.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes through our upbringing. It comes through a lot of times with the friends that we associate with,
Mm-hmm.
which are choices that we make, and then they have an impact, and it's an additive impact. It's little by little by little by little, right? Um, Certainly, uh, what happens is, and I had a friend of mine that actually experienced this in seventh grade. He um, made a choice to begin to hang out with a different group of friends, and those friends started doing shoplifting. And initially, he knew that that was bad. He knew that that was wrong. But after a while of kind of hanging out with them, pretty soon he was shoplifting. Well, then it led, and I know this is anecdotal, but understand that his experience was that these friends began to experiment with drugs, and it was easy stuff that they could get a hold of, and then it increased and it increased until finally he was arrested as a drug abuse person. He was convicted. He went to jail where he got cleaned up. But when he came out of jail, which was less than a year, as I recall him telling me, he went right back to friends that supported that kind of lifestyle. So he ended up going back into rehabilitation and incarceration for a second time.
Hmm.
This time, as he came out, he made a choice. He said, I am not going to get back into that same scenario. I'm going to avoid the people that think that's okay. And he started to change his life. Now, interestingly enough, he ended up getting arrested again on an unrelated charge, but because it was three strikes, you're out, that time he was sent to jail term um, for over a year. And that's actually where I ended up connecting with him, is that his mom asked me to visit him as a friend while he was still incarcerated. But it was after he got out that I learned his full story. And and I think that it's important that we recognize that we're interacting with people all the time who have biases. As I was concluding my time in high tech marketing, I was becoming disillusioned by the fact that I was leveraging technology to get people to buy something from a company that we had valid and valuable products, but the way that we were marketing to them was to create a, a perception that they needed this product. It was the only product that would work, and that they would be safe, completely safe, if they bought our product right now.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times you get stuck in that marketing plan of urgency, of price, of wow factor. There's steps that the marketing people go through.
Right. And again, like you said, if there is a somebody famous that is also saying this is great, this will work, or this is true, then again, people will jump on that. Right. So yeah, lead us through this, because I think this is so important that we understand that, okay, people have bias. We're looking at the world through our own tinted glasses,
Yep.
but almost every major media outlet also has a bias. And I think that sometimes we forget that.
Yeah, and here's one example I'll give you. Just about a month and a half ago, there was a news article that came out. It was talking about kind of announcing this position that, as a religious leader, had taken on abortion. And the abortion, his whole presentation was love for the people that are having to deal with the situation and what situations have to deal with. And it was a wonderful, loving talk about how to treat people that are in a situation where they might consider abortion, and how we need to help them consider other options. The news article headline was saying, so and so denounces abortion. That was the headline. Now, if you only saw the headline, you would think that this person was just lashing out against anybody who was abortion. But if you went in and read the article, you would see that it was nothing like that.
Hmm.
And it just made me furious to think. And I wrote a letter to the editor. Do you think I got a reply? I said, your choice of headlines are misleading and wrong.
We talk about clickbait when we're thinking about online. The reality, though, is that, yeah, publications use, you know, physical publications use headlines to draw people in all the time. And again, it's like, well, that's not where I thought it was going to go, or that's how it would end,
Mhm.
because based on the headline, I thought this was going to be, a different scenario.
Right, right. And here's this list of 7 items. Again, for some reason I like 7. But right at the bottom is your one you just talked about, is biases.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about, is there a loaded or manipulative language in that will trigger your bias, something that you're already emotional about. But just to talk about the others just quickly, here's check the source. Is it a reputable source? Now, this news
Mhm.
report was a reputable company, at least I thought they were in the past, but they can lose reputation. Some of the big ones have lost some clout
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
of the way that they report their stories. Now, read beyond the headline. Does the full story match what the headline claims? In this case, the full story was nothing like the headline. The
Right.
headline was clickbait, as you say, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, third is consider the evidence. Now, what evidence is there, and can you back it up? Is there some scientific reports on it? Do they have claims that seem unreasonable, or is it an opinion?
Mhm.
Does someone expressing their personal beliefs and feelings? An opinion is not a truth. Opinion is, people say, "Oh, it's my truth." Well,
Right.
there's
Right. I've heard that.
yeah, that's that's not a thing. My truth is not a thing, and that's hard to get across. But that's another story.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Look for other coverage. That's talking about checking your sources. Is there a report on multiple things? Like during COVID, there was a gun. Well, the reported was there was gun violence in a school in Germany. That
Mhm.
was the first headline, and I wanted to see what's going on because, gosh, I never hear of violence in anywhere but here in the United States, right? So I looked it up, and the only thing I could see is there was a knife attack at a school. That's all I could see, and I went back, and the other headline got deleted. So they had taken the violence and changed it from a gun to a knife to a gun. And so I had to go to a third one to find out, oh, it really was just a knife attack.
Hmm.
So there's all these kind of things of, twisting the coverage. And some of the basic ones, check the date. Is the information outdated? I mean, our news from yesterday is now history, right? It's not news.
Right.
And then biases. So these are some basic steps on how to spot the truth in the media and how to identify truth. And a lot of it is just common sense, being aware that the facts and data may not all be there.
Right. Right. So, as you're talking about that, I had remembered that I had just recently, like within the last couple of days, come across a new source that actually takes an aggregation of all news media sources on any given event or topic, and it tries to then rate um, what you're reading or hearing or seeing on a scale. Does it lean right? Does it lean left? Is it centered? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm going to have to do a little bit more research because we can put that link to that particular balanced website to be a resource for our listeners. But in the meantime, other places that do a good job are allsides.com, and it's all one word, allsides.com.
Mm.
And then there's another one that I've used with my speech and debate students that I've really liked, because what it does is it goes out and actually measures on a scale where all of the entire world's media lands, and it analyzes it in terms of what you would call conservative thinking or liberal thinking. And that tool is available at ADFONTES media. So adfontesmedia.com. And we'll link that.
Yeah.
But that, what it does is that it allows you to see how they are measuring. Now, this is I know it's a .com, but it's actually run by a um, a totally neutral group, a think tank, if you will, of people who are just simply saying, here is the data. And now they've created the data. And then you might say, well, that could skew things. But when you look at how they rate and weight every single media outlet, and you start to say, okay, here's the ones that are centered, here's the ones that lean a little bit right, and you would probably see that and recognize, oh yeah, okay, that totally makes sense. Here's the ones that lean a little bit left, and
Mhm.
you would say, yeah, okay. And then from there, they start to go out to the extremes. And maybe as a final cautionary tale, uh, it is the extremes that scream the loudest, who vie for our attention, actually battle for our attention and our buy in. And even when we don't stand up to either extreme, it is complicit that we are saying it's okay that, and yes, there's freedom in media, right? Freedom of the press, freedom of speech. Yes, 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 absolutely. But we have to be more careful. Now, here's that case in point. In a recent podcast that I was listening to, there was a, a an example there that was given that said, okay, so we've got extremists on both sides, and they are calling each other fascists.
Mm.
So obviously something's not adding up if the right is calling the left fascists and the left is calling the right fascists. You can't have it both ways. It doesn't make sense. And in point of fact, if you were to really look at a continuum, if we wanted to go completely to the extreme political end of the liberal, um, I'm losing a word here, but the extreme end, then we would be looking at communism. So there's a development that goes through until that's where you are. If you go the other way, if you go to extreme right beyond our political parties, I mean, you keep going further and further out, you're going to end up with fascism, where you have government of just a few over many. Okay, that's fascism, and the people then basically have to do what the government tells them, or they are going to be in extreme danger. Well, wait a second. That actually is the exact same situation that people find themselves under really dictatorial communistic rule, is that they are in fact in danger if they oppose the government. What's interesting then is that even though we may be defining the extremes a little bit differently, ultimately they create the same environment where people are in danger for expressing their opinion, their feelings, their quest for truth, and millions of people can be harmed, killed, oppressed, and we have to be more willing to find out where we believe and where that truth really is, because truth actually doesn't change. It's always there. It's always a constant. We just have to uncover it, and we have to be willing to do the research. We have to be willing to take the time, which is hard sometimes. It requires effort, but that is the only way that we will ultimately understand what is true, what is real, what we should believe.
That's a great conclusion, Paul. I think that if we can set aside our biases long enough to look at all the facts and gather all the details on it,
Mm-hmm.
we'll come to
And sometimes there's a definite need, and sometimes it's just we need to be more curious.
right. And in my life, does it matter if there's 8 or 9 planets? Probably not.
Wait, them's fighting words. Or maybe not.
Well, if I'm a printer and I have to reprint all those history books, I might like that.
Right.
But see, there's a way to twist it into, yeah, you need to fix all these books. We need to print. Okay, we're going off on another tangent. But
Yeah.
all right, well, great. That's we've got some great information. We're going to keep this posted so that you've got these to refer to, and hopefully it's helped you to determine more truth in your life. So until next time, we'll see y'all later, and enjoy